Hello, everyone. Welcome to the World News. Now, recently, many reports have been published that Japan, India's friendly country, may impose sanctions on many Indian companies. Here you will see that many reports have been published in the media related to this. Many videos have come out that Japan is considering sanctions against Indian firms for having business ties with Russia. Yes, Japan is now becoming so aggressive about the Russia issue. Not only Japan. Actually, all the G7 countries, which also include Japan. Now it is targeting all these third-party countries. That if sanctions were to be imposed on Russia, they have been imposed. But there are some third-party countries with which even a remote trade or transaction has taken place, where Russia was involved. There is now talk of imposing sanctions there also openly. And that is why you must have seen that such articles are being published continuously. Although Japan has not yet officially imposed any sanctions. But it is believed that very soon Japan will impose sanctions targeting companies of many countries. Let me repeat again that it is not that Japan will be specifically targeting India. It is being told that there are many other countries including India, China, UAE, Uzbekistan whose companies have traded with Russia in some way or the other. If they have not followed the sanctions of G7, then Japan will impose sanctions on those companies. Now here you can ask, haven't you heard about Japanese sanctions? Usually when we talk about sanctions, the first thing that comes to mind is USA. That if sanctions are imposed on the whole world, then only USA does it. And there is a reason for this, because USA has so much power. Look, anyone can impose sanctions. Even countries like Pakistan can also impose it. But what is the meaning of those sanctions? Sanctions of a weak country, restrictions of a weak country. They are worthless. It will not have any power. If we look at Japan, it is an advanced country, a very important economy, and its sanctions matter. And if you are asking whether Japan has ever imposed sanctions on India in history, then let me tell you, yes, it has. We often forget that the era we are seeing today, the Indian economy is growing. Recently, we saw a growth rate of 8%. Apart from that, we are constantly seeing that India is being invited to G7. World leaders are praising India. It was not always like this. India has gone through very difficult times in the past. If you see India in 1998, the situation was very different at that time. Today's Japan, which has become a very friendly country to India, was not like this in 1998. When India conducted the Pokhran nuclear test, many countries around the world had imposed sanctions on India, including Japan. And that is why now again there is talk of sanctions in 2024. So people are saying that this will be the first time since 1998 when Japan will impose sanctions on India. Again, there is no talk of imposing sanctions on the Indian government. Even if sanctions are imposed, they will be imposed on one or two particular companies. The way the US recently imposed sanctions. And you will remember when the USA imposed sanctions on Indian companies. Because according to the USA, these companies were helping in transporting Iranian drones all the way to Russia. And then I told you that, despite these sanctions, India-US relations will not deteriorate at the government level. The cooperation between the two countries will continue. And the same case will be with regard to the India-Japan issue. India will most likely not react in a big way when Japan imposes sanctions. Again, I have to say here, let's see whether Japan imposes these sanctions or not. Because statements are coming from their side where the chief secretary of the Japanese government. You can see here. His name is Yoshimasa Heisei. He has said that, in the recent G7 summit, we have announced a new package of sanctions to help Ukraine. You must know that in the recent G7 summit, G7 countries have taken big steps to help Ukraine. First of all, Russia's money, which was in the US, Europe, was seized. And a very large amount of this money was given to Ukraine, in the form of a soft loan. Apart from that, the G7 countries also announced that the companies which are not following the sanctions of the G7 countries, and are trading with Russia from somewhere or the other, and are helping Russia, will also be sanctioned directly or indirectly. And here you can see the statement. We means Japan. We are looking at major companies from China, India, UAE, and Uzbekistan. Now I have to add here that this move is not going to help Ukraine much. What will happen here? with countries under sanctions, that is China, India or UAE, and Uzbekistan. Look, the case of China is different. But the goodwill that people of India, UAE, and Uzbekistan have towards the G7 countries will reduce even more. Frustration will build up. A feeling will come that these G7 countries run the world by making their own rules, and they almost dictate with whom the companies of other countries will trade, and with whom they will not trade. And it is possible that in future, these policies of G7 may cause some economic loss to India. For example, I will tell you that a very simple trade between India, Russia, and the rest of the world is that a lot of raw diamonds come to India from Russia. India purchases these raw diamonds, and after polishing these diamonds, primarily in Gujarat, India exports them to Europe, US, and other places in European Union. And G7 has banned these Russian diamonds, due to which India will also suffer loss by default. India's Foreign Minister Mr. Dr. S. Jaishankar recently said that we will raise this issue with Europe and with country of G7 that you have banned these Russian diamonds. This will also impact the economy of many other countries. So, India will have to raise this issue. And that is why I would say that somewhere the importance of BRICS increases a lot for these countries, as a counterbalance. Otherwise, you yourself think that if there is only one group in the world, G7, that is taking all the decisions, they do not care about the economy of other countries, their trade. They just want the world to run according to them. So obviously this will hurt the interests of other countries. So now we have to see what Japan does here. On how many companies does Japan impose sanctions? Does it impose sanctions? Or not? And how does India respond to this? Again, I would say here that India-Japan relations will not be affected by this. For once, I would also say that there should be some pressure from US and G7 on Japan to do something for Ukraine. Do something to help Ukraine. Otherwise, if you think about it, what happens with Ukraine? Or, what does not happen, its geopolitical impact on Japan is negligible. But still, since Japan is a part of G7, so they also have to participate in all this. So now see, this topic of sanctions will be in the news a lot for the coming days. Some major updates will come. Japanese sanctions will imposed. On which countries' companies will sanctions imposed? I will bring you an updated video related to that later. And finally, with this note, this is the end of the video. Thank you for watching. And as I always say, may the gods watch over you.